We go in low. Radio silence until target is confirmed.
Copy that, Will. You really think this trick will fool them?
It is not a trick, Jack. It is survival.
Make it count, gentlemen.
It was 1943. Over the blood-red skies of occupied France, Captain William Carter faced the impossible. His entire squadron was gone, torn apart minutes ago. 7 enemy fighters searched below, hungry for one final kill. Out of fuel, out of time, and utterly alone, Carter whispered a single plan, an insane maneuver no pilot had ever attempted. What happened next would rewrite every rule of air combat and echo through every hangar in the Allied world. Before we start, hit that like button and tell us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these incredible WWII stories alive. It was the winter of 1943, and the European sky carried a strange quiet that morning. Captain William Carter sat inside the cockpit of his P-47 Thunderbolt, a fortress of steel trembling under the pressure of altitude and fear. The glass canopy shimmered with frost, and the radio hummed with broken static, whispering fragments of orders that no longer mattered. His squadron had been erased in minutes. 8 men gone, no parachutes, no voices, only smoke disappearing into cloud layers thick as ash. He looked down at the countryside, now a blur of snow-covered fields and black scars of bombed villages. The enemy fighters moved below him, confident, circling like wolves that had already tasted blood. Carter steadied his breathing. His gloved hands tightened on the stick. Each second felt stretched, drawn thin by memory and disbelief. The silence inside his helmet became heavier than any sound. Fuel was running low. Ammunition was nearly gone. Every pilot in his training had sworn that the maneuver he was thinking about was suicide. He had read about it once in an engineering note, a strange twist of aerodynamics that could stall an aircraft for a heartbeat, flip it, and recover behind the opponent. The risk was absolute. A single miscalculation meant death. But the math inside his head whispered, yes. He checked his instruments once more. Altimeter steady, engine temperature climbing. The world around him was a tunnel of gray mist and gunpowder smell. He pulled the oxygen mask tighter, hearing his own breath echo like a ticking clock. In that lonely sky, Carter thought of home, his father's workshop in Ohio, the sound of old radios crackling with baseball commentary. He thought of a promise he had made to his younger brother before leaving. Come back with a story worth telling. The first enemy fighter climbed toward him, sunlight flashing from its wings. Carter waited. He counted the seconds as if measuring distance between heartbeats. Then he pushed the throttle forward, dove sharply, and pulled the aircraft into the wind. The G-force crushed his chest. The Thunderbolt screamed, its wings vibrating against the limits of design. Smoke trailed behind like a warning. The German pilots followed, confident that gravity would finish the job. But Carter's dive was not chaos. It was calculation. At the last possible instant, he cut the throttle, kicked the rudder, and rolled into the impossible. For a fraction of a second, the Thunderbolt floated, hanging between stall and control, like time itself had hesitated. Then gravity flipped his world upside down. The horizon spun, and suddenly the hunter became the hunted. From that inverted moment began a sequence that no one on the ground would ever believe. The trick that was meant to be theory became his only way home. The world turned into a storm of metal and wind. Captain William Carter's P-47 hung inverted for a split second, the earth above him, the sky below. Gravity dragged at the wings, and his heartbeat matched the engine's violent pulse. When control finally returned, he was no longer prey. He came out behind the first enemy fighter, unseen, exactly as the theory had promised. Carter squeezed the trigger. The guns roared once, short and measured, and the tracers cut through the fog like burning strings of fate. The enemy aircraft shuddered, lost balance, and spiraled away into the mist. Carter did not watch it fall. There was no time for triumph. 6 fighters remained, and each one carried a veteran behind the stick. The radio was dead, the compass unreliable, but instinct took command. He climbed through the haze, using the sun as cover, feeling the air thin until frost gathered on his visor. The sound of his breathing filled the cockpit. He had become both hunter and ghost. Below, another pair of enemy planes searched in tight formation. Carter tilted the Thunderbolt downward, wings slicing through thin cloud like knives through paper. He kept the throttle steady. Patience was survival. The moment he broke cover, both fighters banked hard, their movements clean, disciplined. They fired first. Lines of light crossed the air around him, harmless at first, then closer, snapping at the edges of his wings. Carter rolled left, then right, every motion precise, learned from endless nights in the simulator where wind was imagination and death was only ink. But this was real. Each maneuver stole more altitude. Each escape narrowed the horizon. He felt the pull of exhaustion pressing behind his eyes. Then came the idea, the same impossible trick, but reversed. He cut power completely, letting his plane drop nose first. To the enemy, it looked like surrender. Both fighters followed, chasing the falling target. At the last instant, he reignited the engine, kicked the rudder, and the Thunderbolt snapped upward with brutal speed. The sudden climb placed him behind the pair before they could react. 2 bursts, sharp and surgical, turned the pursuit into silence. Now 3 down. 4 to go. Carter exhaled slowly. The engine coughed, temperature rising again. He knew he could not fight forever. Somewhere below, the countryside blurred with snow and smoke. The enemy would soon regroup, using numbers and discipline to crush him. Yet a strange calm settled inside him. He was no longer fighting for victory, not even survival. He was fighting for balance, for the rhythm of sky and steel that only a pilot could understand. He turned the plane west, away from the sun, scanning the horizon for the remaining shapes. Far ahead, 4 black dots appeared, spreading in formation. They were waiting for him. The real test had not begun yet. Carter tightened his gloves and whispered to himself, not for courage, but for clarity. The sky was no longer an enemy. It was a mirror, and every reflection carried the memory of those who had fallen before him. He pushed the throttle forward and flew straight into the light. The sun broke through the clouds in fractured gold, scattering light across the frozen horizon. Captain William Carter felt the warmth on his visor for the first time that morning, but it brought no comfort. The 4 enemy fighters ahead flew with perfect precision, cutting through the sky like synchronized shadows. They had spotted him now. There would be no more surprises. This time, the advantage belonged to them. He checked his ammunition. Barely a few bursts left in each gun. The Thunderbolt had endured too much. Engine heat near redline, controls stiff from cold, oil pressure flickering. The smell of burnt metal and cordite filled the cockpit. Carter steadied his breathing and scanned their formation. The leader stayed centered, the others forming a deadly triangle around him. It was a trap designed for panic, and panic killed more pilots than bullets. Carter did not panic. He dropped altitude, letting the cloud swallow him whole. The radio crackled once, faint static from some faraway command channel, then went silent again. He imagined the voices of his fallen wingmen somewhere in that static, calling from beyond the noise. He turned slightly east to catch the light, then rose through the fog with a steady climb. His mind replayed every flight lesson he had ever ignored, every instinct he had trusted. Above him, the sky stretched into silver distance, quiet, endless, waiting. The first pair dived to intercept. Carter banked hard, the Thunderbolt groaning in protest. The enemy lined up their shots. For a split second, tracer fire danced across his right wing, shredding paint but missing the frame. He turned sharply into the sun, blinding his pursuers. The glare seared through his visor, but it also made him invisible for a heartbeat. That heartbeat was enough. He pulled into a spiral climb, then cut the throttle mid-turn. The maneuver reversed their momentum completely, throwing one enemy pilot off course. Carter fired once, short, controlled. The German fighter veered sideways and vanished into cloud. He did not see it hit, but he knew. The formation above broke apart in confusion. 3 remained. They circled him like hawks, patient now, learning his rhythm. Carter's pulse slowed, matching theirs. The air felt heavy, as if history itself was watching. He imagined the ground below, the soldiers, the villages, the people who would never know his name, yet live beneath the echoes of this battle. The sky belonged to no one, yet it demanded everything. He began to climb again, luring them higher, into thinner air, where engines strained and wings stiffened. His own controls shook, metal creaking under the stress. The world below was shrinking, fading into haze. The lead enemy pilot broke formation, rushing in from above. Carter saw him coming through the glare, just a shadow against light, and rolled sharply left. The attack missed by inches, but it brought the rest closer. He turned the Thunderbolt upside down and began to fall. The enemy followed without hesitation. The Earth came rushing up, distant and terrifying. At the last possible second, Carter flipped upright, just as before, and the trailing fighter overshot. Another clean burst from the machine guns ended the chase. Now 2 remained. The sky grew quieter. Carter could feel the strain deep inside the aircraft's frame, the vibration of every bolt and cable. He whispered into the static, not for luck, but for focus. The air smelled of oil and frost. Somewhere inside that noise, the war continued, uncaring, endless, and he was still flying. The sky was thinning into white haze when the last 2 enemy fighters closed in. Captain William Carter steadied his grip, feeling the dull ache crawl up his forearms. His Thunderbolt had become a wounded beast, its skin torn, its engine trembling with fatigue. Yet it still obeyed him, loyal and furious. The fuel gauge needle trembled on the edge of empty, and the altimeter ticked down with each breath. Below, France stretched like a forgotten map, roads carved through fog and fire. Carter could sense their confidence. The 2 German pilots were skilled, disciplined, trained for precision. They flew with calm aggression, each movement deliberate, almost surgical. Together they mirrored his turns, tightening the circle, waiting for the mistake they believed would come. He watched them through the reflection of sunlight on his canopy, their silhouettes gliding closer, cutting the distance yard by yard. He remembered the first days of flight school, how his instructor had spoken about rhythm, not speed. Every sky has a pulse, the man had said. Find it, and you control the fight. Carter had never forgotten those words. Now, in the choking silence of high altitude, he searched for that pulse again. The wind hummed through the frame, the propeller sang a low metallic tone, and within that noise he found it, a pattern, faint but steady. He broke the circle, throttle forward. The Thunderbolt shuddered, but responded, climbing into the glare of the sun. The enemy followed, their engines screaming against the strain. Sweat rolled down his temples. He knew he could not outrun them, but he could unbalance them. At the crest of the climb, he cut power completely. The sudden drop felt like falling into nothing. Gravity seized the aircraft. His stomach rose, his lungs locked. The enemy overshot, confused by the stall. Carter slammed the throttle open again. The plane roared back to life, twisting into a roll that brought him behind one of them. A single burst. Smoke bloomed in the air, black and final. One left. The last German pilot did not flee. He turned sharply head-on as if to settle it in one final pass. The distance between them closed fast, 2 machines rushing toward destiny. Carter's mind slowed the world to fragments, the tremor of his hand, the flicker of the horizon, the hum of a dying engine. He held the trigger, but did not fire. Instead, he tilted upward, using the enemy's climb against him. Their paths crossed so close that for an instant he saw the other pilot's eyes. Young, focused, afraid. Carter pulled into a vertical climb, engine groaning under strain. The German followed, desperate to match him. The air grew thin, the controls sluggish. Then Carter flipped the Thunderbolt over and dove. The enemy could not recover. The dive became a spiral, the sky swallowing sound. Carter leveled out at the last second, his vision blurred from the G-force. He did not celebrate. There was no triumph left in him, only silence and the faint crackle of static on the dead radio. The battlefield above the clouds was empty now. The war had paused, just for him, suspended in the echo of what he had done. He looked out across the horizon, where sunlight spilled through the torn clouds like a promise. The Thunderbolt trembled, engine coughing, but it still carried him. The mission was not about victory anymore. It was about returning with proof that courage and madness sometimes share the same sky. He turned west, toward home, leaving behind the smoke and the ghosts that had flown beside him. The western sky opened before him, washed in orange and silver, the color of endings. Captain William Carter flew low over the French countryside, the hum of his P-47 uneven, struggling to hold power. The gauges were dying one by one, and the wind seeped through cracks in the canopy. He kept his eyes forward. Every vibration, every tremor of the engine carried a message. Not much longer. The radio remained silent, just the faint hiss of static like breathing from another world. Below, scattered farms and ruined villages passed in silence. Smoke from distant fires drifted upward, blurring the horizon into soft gray. He knew he was somewhere behind friendly lines, but he did not know how far. His fuel would last minutes, maybe less. He thought of the men who had flown beside him only hours ago, their laughter over breakfast, the noise of engines warming in the cold morning air. Now only memory filled the cockpit. He reached for the small photograph taped to the dashboard, a woman standing by a red barn, her smile steady, fearless, merry. He had written her every week, never telling her how close death came, only how beautiful the clouds looked at dawn. He stared at the picture, then back at the sky. "Almost home," he whispered, the words breaking inside the oxygen mask. A faint crackle came through the radio. Static, then a voice. American, distant, almost unreal. "Thunder 1, this is Eagle Base. Do you copy?" The sound froze him. He pressed the switch. "Eagle, this is Thunder 1, returning from mission. Low on fuel. Aircraft damaged." The silence stretched for seconds that felt endless. Then came the reply. "Copy, Thunder 1, you are clear to approach. We have you on scope. Welcome home." Carter exhaled slowly, feeling the weight inside his chest lift, just enough to breathe again. He could see the coast now, a thin line between sea and sky. He guided the Thunderbolt lower, watching waves glint beneath him. The engine sputtered, gasped, then caught once more. The airfield appeared through the mist, a lonely strip carved from fields of mud. He lowered the landing gear manually. The wheels groaned, as if reluctant to believe they would touch ground again. The final approach was quiet. No cheers, no music, only wind and heartbeat. The Thunderbolt kissed the earth, bounced once, then rolled to a halt at the far end of the runway. The propeller slowed, the roar fading into silence. Carter sat motionless, hands resting on the controls, eyes closed. Ground crews rushed toward the smoking plane, shouting orders he could not hear. When they pulled open the canopy, cold air flooded in. Carter looked up, the sunlight sharp against his face. He removed his mask and smiled, not in victory, but in disbelief that the world below still existed. One of the mechanics asked, "How many, Captain?" He paused, glancing toward the distant clouds where 7 trails of smoke had once burned across the sky. "Too many," he said softly, "and not enough." The man nodded without another word. Carter climbed down, boots sinking into the wet earth. He turned once toward the horizon. The war was far from over, but for this moment it was silent. The wind carried only the sound of waves, distant and steady, like a heartbeat reminding him that he was still alive. And somewhere beyond that silence, in every whisper of air, the sky remembered what one pilot had done when all hope had burned away.